and I am going to go to the other room and help her share her screen.
Let me get your video on.
Okay, good.
It's a little thing popping up that made you co-host.
Mhm.
That should give us power to. Oops. Start video.
Great.
Leave you to it.
You're good to go, Mary.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm excited to share some of my knowledge about gardening, and my particular expertise is in growing flowers. And I grew up on a farm. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up on a farm in Hardy County. So our farm was diversified small farm, but there were 5 children, and my mother had a big garden, but there were always flowers in the garden. So I'm the child who, the flower child who decided that to really take off, and this is one of the things that I am very passionate about. I'm a retired Jefferson County school teacher. I still keep my hands in that some. I do some virtual education with some students a couple of days a week. And so I am happy to be here to hopefully add to your knowledge about growing flowers. And as you can see on the screen, there is my email, wvgardengal@aol.com. And I would certainly welcome any questions that you might have, or any follow-up that I could do after, if you have questions. So as I'm going through the presentation, I'm going to be talking about a lot of the plants that I have included the pictures of. And I'm gonna just, and Emily has a handout that I have created that is a chart with a lot of my favorite annuals, perennials, and biennials in it, and with a lot of the growing conditions for them. And so I'm going to be talking and referencing those as we go. At the top left, you see the snapdragons, one of my favorite annuals. And in many places, those are hardy annuals. The geranium on the right would be what we call a tender annual, because the frost is going to nip it. But and my snapdragons that I planted last summer, the shorter ones were, I was out looking eagerly to see what was alive in my garden just recently, and so the foliage is still there. So I will cut off the old blossoms and give them a haircut, and they'll be good to go. Okay, so things I wish I had known when I was a beginning gardener. Oops, Emily.
Hit the arrow keys.
I'm hitting the arrow.
Try clicking on the screen.
I'm swiping.
Okay, I'm coming.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm doing the down arrow.
Hit the side.
Oh, so I could do it down here. All right, this, there we go. Now, show me where.
Back.
There, thank you.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. All right. Get the technology part out of the way here. That's why I'm here in the office. You can come to my rescue. All right, these pictures are pictures of my gardens. So, and in many ways, even though I've gardened for a long time, in the last 2 years, we've moved. And so the garden that I had grown up with, or not grown up with, but most of my married life for 40 years, I had established, and we had a lot of flower beds where we lived in Martinsburg. And then we decided to move. And luckily, the house we did choose had some established beds, which was a selling point of the house. But I had many plants that I needed to move from the other house. So the picture on the left of the ferns, that's one of my shade gardens. And that is a new bed that I just really established this current year. So and I will reference this, there are the autumn ferns and lady ferns and maidenhair ferns along with hostas. So those are perfect for the shade bed there. In the center, that's more probably in June. And this was at the old house. So those were the poppies, and a friend of mine had given me the seeds for those. And that was the first year that they had bloomed so beautifully. And I think those are a kind of peony poppy. Some of you might know the specific name of that one, but I just thought they were beautiful. And that's larkspur biennial there with them. So really both of those, the poppies and the larkspur, are biennials. And then on the right, you see my gooseneck loosestrife. That's the white, and you can see by the heads of them how they look like a goose's neck, and bee balm there in the back. So both of those are great for pollinators. A lot of people think that the loosestrifes are invasive and are more problems, but I just try to keep it in check. And so it's still one of my favorite summer plants. So you can tell that garden, the one on the right, is pretty far established into summer. So number one, in choosing where you're going to establish your bed, and as I started my new beds at our new house, this was very important, choosing the best site. And so you're looking for at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day. You are looking at the quality of the soil in that part of your yard. And of course, we'd like to have optimal loam soil, but as in the flower beds, or in the regular soil where I live now, it is not good soil at all. And the beds that they had built up, they had brought in a lot of good soil, so that the quality is much different there. So looking for the best soil, and we'll talk about how to amend your soil to improve that. And I'm certainly, working on that as well. And then the other factor there at the lower right is the stability of the area. Looking at your drainage in your yard to see if there is an area that floods more, or perhaps you have drainage from a pipe from your house or water spout, or an area that is really more prone to wind. And the house where we're living now, the wind is a big factor. So that's very important to look at. So number 2, follow the sun. Again, that I had to really do that in our new home. When we were selling our home and I had all those flowers, I started potting up. I'd gone to Colonial Nursery and asked them if I could borrow some big, like couple gallon, 2-gallon pots and plastic pots. And so I started digging up my perennials the fall before we moved. And so we moved hundreds of pots. And we moved in July, which is not a great time to plant those things. But we moved 7 pickup truck loads of perennials and a flatbed trailer full. So it was a big, big project. So my goal then was to get everything in the ground, just so it would survive. It needed to come out of the pots and in the ground. And so as I lived in the house, then this is what I had to do. I had to look where my sun was coming in, which were the shade areas, which were full sun. So this follow the sun was a really important key for me in determining then last spring where I moved some of those plants. So if you start early in the morning, and then take note of what the sun exposure is then look what's, partial shade, dappled sun, full shade, and then look at that area, again until sunset. Also, looking at trees, fences, even where, where the way your house faces, the directionality there of your yard is a big factor in the success of your growing. Stay close to the water. When you might choose an area for your flower bed thinking, oh, if I look out of the house and I'm looking in that area, that might be a good spot, but will your hose extend that far? Or are you going to put in drip lines for that? So if it's an area where you have to carry water or, in buckets, that it's just going to be so much harder to maintain. At the top right, I've put a picture of a zero gravity, 0G, I think it's called, hose. And if there's a tip that I can pass along as an experienced gardener, I wish that I would have gotten one of those hoses many, many years ago. They are flexible, they are lightweight, they are kind of a fiber on the outside, and they're just so much easier to manipulate when you're watering. So I think I picked up mine at Lowe's, but most better box stores, big box stores or garden centers might carry those. They're not cheap, but they are well worth the investment in that kind of hose. And when you're watering, look at the roots. That's where you need to focus most of your water, not on the leaves. My dear husband helps me a lot. He's not the gardener at all, but he does really, he is my right hand man in assisting. And so I might say, Walt, would you go water this area for me? Or, I'm busy, could you please do that? And Walt still has an issue with the, he thinks when the foliage is wet, he's done a good job. So what are those roots? And even if your, water is needed, watching your weather, but depending upon if you have a flower bed that's close to your house and the rain is coming in one direction, you still may have a drier area even after a rain, if it's not a really hard rain, and flower pots especially. So watering deeply and then watering early in the day is the best time. In our perfect world, that might happen, but many times watering early in the day isn't, it just doesn't fit in with their schedules. And, I've been known to even put on one of those headlamps and go out even after dark to water because I knew that things were really dry. So definitely trying to take care of your plants when you get them in. And your soil, start with good soil is number 4. So I think Emily covered a couple of weeks ago about the pH of the soil and gave that great presentation on that. And so ideal would be 6 to 7. And I just picked up this evening some forms to have my soil tested at our new home. And because I have different kinds of soil and different beds, so I'm going to take different soil samples. But to improve your soil, which a lot of our soil in this area is rocky and clay, and it isn't the best. So adding those organic materials over time will really improve the quality of your soil. And I'm a big composter, so I definitely believe in amending the soil by all of those things. Plant materials, adding leaves, straw, grass clippings, composting, decayed plant materials, your vegetable scraps, any of those products. We keep a compost bucket on the counter all year round, and then add soil into that. And even last winter, we dug the compost right into some of the new flower beds that we had established, just to increase the organic material in there. Compost and manure is another good way to improve the soil and add more nitrogen, but you're adding that in particularly before you start. Peat moss is a conditioner that helps to retain water and lower your soil pH. With a lot of clay soils and soils that don't offer as much drainage, that's a good way to lighten up your soil. Topsoil, you can buy bags of topsoil to add in. I did find, and I have the link there at the bottom, I was really surprised that the farmersalmanac.com has a lot of good gardening tips there and on preparing your soil planting. So I put the link there as well. Number 5 in establishing your flower beds is consider whether you're going to have in-ground beds or raised beds. And it's really important when you're starting a new flower bed to visualize what it's going to be looking like in the future. And in the beginning, it will not look like it's going to be very full or colorful, but try to look at the labels on the plant markers and check out your spacing on those and try to visualize what your plants will look like with the fuller, taller ones in the back, and then the shorter ones, of course, in the front. If you anticipate the heights and the colors and the textures and the mass of all of your various plants, then it will be helpful in just visualizing that and having it more colorful and with a lot more interest. I am a more cottage garden style gardener. I don't need just empty soil between my plants. I like that English garden, that full look. So I like to repeat and the perennials, particularly as I'm planting, and then fill in other color with the annuals. Something I was just reading talked about the perennials being the backbone of your garden. So and we're going to talk a lot more at the end about the choosing your plants and those perennials. So if you have a color scheme in mind, that will help. And if you'll choose like a couple of main colors and then put in primary colors and then put in the other colors, that will be a more harmonious kind of appeal. But you know what? Gardening is such a personal matter that, you know, if it looks good to you and you're really enjoying it, you know, you're doing this for you. So that's also important to think of. Consider the texture and shape of your plants. And, you know, you might think, oh, you know, I'm not really too concerned about the texture, but really that can add a lot of just a lot of contrast to your garden, and will just make some plants just pop out a lot more. When you're working the soil before you're planting, turn it over to a depth of at least about a foot, and adding compost into that and then working that in. On the right, I put a little diagram of a lasagna garden. I know we've talked about that in some of the previous presentations. I'll share with you what we did when we moved to the new house. There was an area, and the backyard of our new house is fenced. And so there was an area that the grass wasn't as good. They had some, excuse me, some wood stacked there. And so they had moved that. And so I decided in this one corner would be a really good spot for a new flower bed. And we had lots of cardboard from our move. So on the bottom of the small diagram, you'll see where it says cardboard, paper over existing surface. So what we did was we took the cardboard, we stripped all the packing tape off of it, and then layered it in pretty heavily, then wet all that down. Then I had a friend that we knew had another friend who lives down the road from us, and this guy collected grass from his mower. So I hooked up with him, and he brought me pickup loads of grass clippings. And so that the grass clippings went in. Then on top of that, I had saved my bagged leaves from the other house. They even got moved to the new house. A lot of big leaf bags of leaves, which by that time had rotted. So they went in next. Then another area, then we put more cardboard on top. I called the guy, we got more grass clippings. Then I didn't have any more leaves, so I needed some more brown. So the key is green, brown, when you're doing lasagna gardening. And so then I decided to use some, we used some straw. We also used some, we bought topsoil because I live close to Martinsburg. The Lowe's in Martinsburg, I found out they had more bags that were damaged. So we borrowed a pickup truck and we filled the pickup truck with bags of topsoil or different kinds of composted manure that were burst. And so then we put those on next. And then we topped it off with topsoil and composted manure. So from my experience, we had it probably a foot or more deep. And then we added on more. So then we put raised stones, landscaping stones around the sides and built that up. 3 stones, edged it with that. And it would take about 2 to 3 months for that to start decomposing. Now, because we did it in the summer and it was pretty dry, then I had to water that to accelerate it. Also, the nitrogen in the manure helps to break that down more. So it was amazing to really watch that. And I'd done a little bit of lasagna gardening before, but I was really impressed with the quality of the soil that was made by doing that. And the other really good thing that happens is you are drawing in earthworms, and those certainly are your friends if you are looking for some good soil. If you have earthworms in your soil, when you dig down in, you just say, how blessed I am. Because that will certainly be helpful in having for you to have a successful garden. And the other thing you might want to do is consider containers. I know some people don't have as much space or don't have the time to invest in raised beds or container or in-ground gardens. So containers are another really good way to do gardening. And choosing the type of container is very important. Clay or terracotta pots are going to dry out a lot faster than some of the other pots. Plus, if you leave your pots outside in the winter, many times they are not going to withstand a lot of freeze unless you empty them. And particularly if you turn them upside down, that's generally what I do is the ones that are outside, try to empty them and turn them upside down to use them then for the next year. Plastic pots, there's big variety and what kind of plastic is available. And lots of choices when you go to a big store looking. Ceramic pots, then you're getting into a little bit more expensive, and also the quality of those and whether or not they're going to withstand the freezes in the winter. Those are things to consider. And if you use a wooden pot, then that you may invest in it, but it would probably start to decay after a few years. My husband built one at our other house that he lined. It was a very large wooden, big, like probably 3 feet tall and 3 feet wide, that kind of size. But he lined that, so that one really did well for, I don't know, at least 10 years. So choosing the type of pot is important, but also the size. And I really feel almost the bigger, the better. The pots that I use now on my deck, and I'll show you some pictures of one of those. They're really pretty big, hard to move, but and takes a lot of soil to fill them. But I feel that they provide the best environment and will not dry out as quickly. I can get more soil in them, and I'm more pleased with that, especially if you're in a sunny location that where your pots are going to take a lot of sun. So be thinking of that. Also, when you look at your plant and it's very small going into that plant, try to visualize, how, by looking at your label, how big is this plant going to be? Make sure it has adequate drainage holes. Choose the right soil. Fill your containers with commercial potting soil. And I like to use a moisture retaining potting soil for like my top 6 inches maybe of that soil. And I think that makes a big difference in my quality of the plants in my pot if I put that moisture retaining soil just on the top. Now, if I'm having a big pot that is like, 2.5 feet wide, 3 feet wide, I don't empty that pot, but I will dig down and take out at least 12 to 20 inches of that soil every spring when I'm planting my new things in there. So I want all new soil going into the top part. Some people, if they're going to be moving their pot, they might, you might consider filling the bottom of your pot, not with the soil, but with some people, I have even read someone using plastic bottles in the bottom part, something light that will take up space, that you will not have to use as much soil, because your roots generally are not going to go down. If you have a pot that is, say 2 feet tall, your roots are not going to go down that deep. The next thing, pick healthy plants. And if you look at the diagram there, I've put an illustration of a container that has used a thriller, a filler, and a spiller. And I think that those 3 words are really good for you to think about when you're choosing things for what will make up a good pot or a good container, and it will be showy. So if you look at the top part, the thriller is generally the, what's going to be the showy part, going to be taller. You want to add some height to it. The filler is going to be more horizontal, and then the spiller will probably cascade down into more vertical. So that thriller, filler, spiller, and even if you Google that and look for examples of that, there are lots of sites that are going to give you help with that as well. Match light conditions. So on the back of our house, we have, full sun all afternoon. And I need to make sure that everything that I put in those large pots is going to be, full sun. And on the front of my house, I have morning sun, and then, the rest of the day is shady. So my plants there can be a whole lot different than what I put on the back. So be mindful of your light conditions. Plant in layers. And as you can look at these, just that picture there, you can see the different layers that are visible, and that will certainly add to the appeal of your container. Shorter plants in front, taller ones in the back, and then watering frequently. And the more plants you get in a container, then be thinking about, okay, I need to make sure I water each one of those around their roots. And sometimes when the soil gets a little hard or cakey, I'll get a trowel and just loosen up all of that soil around the plant. And even in the middle of the summer, I have been known to loosen that up and then go get some more of that moisture retaining soil, add to the large pots, and it'll have some fertilizer in it. And so it will be like a big boost to your plants. So fertilize. I am an Osmocote lover. It's a granular, long-lasting fertilizer. I used to use Miracle Grow, the water-soluble kind, but I feel this granular, slow-release kind is the best, for me. Learn your frost dates. We are in planting zones 6A and 6B. And what I found, and again, this is the Farmer's Almanac frost dates, and there are other gardening sites that you can get the frost dates, but our climate stations at Carneysville and the Martinsburg Airport, you can see there, spring frost, May 4th, and Martinsburg, April 28th. That would be then in the fall, October 3rd or October 9th. But my go-to date is that I think of is Mother's Day. And so I don't do a lot of hardcore planting before then. Now, if it's an area close to the house, I might. Or if it's in a pot, well, and the pots are closer to the house, I might start to pot up those. But really in-ground planting, unless you're going to get a plant that is, more tolerant of a little bit of frost. But, the plants that you're buying are going to be grown in a greenhouse in a controlled climate. So even though they may be more tolerant of frost in the fall, when they first are set out in the spring, they are acclimated to that environment in the greenhouse. And so that's what you need to consider there. The growing season is listed there. So, and if you look, that was using the climate normals of 1981 to 2010. So it's hard to get accurate or up-to-date information. But like I said, generally Mother's Day is a good rule of thumb to go by for your date. Adding mulch to around your plants is certainly a really important factor as well. And if you look at the illustration, shredded leaves up at the top, pine bark nuggets, straw, grass, pine needles, pine straw, coca hulls. You can use newspaper, compost manure, grass clippings. All of those are good organic things to use. If you use a landscaping fabric, I've done that, and then use the landscaping fabric and then covered that with mulch. At the old house, we had a larger water garden, and we had a circular path around it. So we used the landscaping fabric, then we covered the top of that with mulch, and that worked pretty well for that, for that area. Mulches definitely slow down evaporation, reduce your runoff, and one thing gardeners really need to consider is they block those weeds. They help to manage your weeds. The best mulches are composted ones or organic matter, which also will help to feed your plants as they grow. This recommends 2 inches of mulch, and it just depends on how much mulch I have and how much time I have, whether they might get 2 inches, sometimes more, sometimes less. But definitely mulching is a big topic and a big focus for you to think of in maintaining your plants. So number 9, maintain your plants. Remove any spent flowers, check for insects, and try to treat them before they get ahead of the game. And watering, pulling your weeds, edging, keeping the grass out, fertilizing and mulching, and doing your seasonal cleanup. I really like this part about don't go crazy when you're picking out flowers. Stick with 3 or 4 groupings of 3 of the same perennial, then fill in with annuals. And the most important tips of all in creating your low maintenance flower bed are your soil preparation. Get your soil ready before you put your plants in. Then watering them when they're in there, and mulching them afterwards. Also, investing in some good quality tools will certainly be an asset for you and help you to work more efficiently. And also, if you're using gloves, and don't forget your sunscreen. I like to go to the Philadelphia Flower Show each year, and there are many, many vendors there. And so I have gotten some good trowels and all there that are really favorites of mine. So the tools can make a big difference. The dollar store tools, they might look nice, but they really are not good good tools for you. So now we get to the big part about choosing the right plants. But before we do that, let's see if there are any questions or comments or things that you would like to share. Emily, what do we have?
Yes, we do have a few in the chats. Some of these I believe you're going to get to a little bit later, so we'll ask those folks to just hang tight.
Okay.
Keely asks specifically about local native species to the area, and if you're going to cover any of those. It's funny, Mary, we were just talking about this before we started the webinar.
Yes.
Linda has a question about raising roses.
Okay.
And one that we might be able to get to right now. Sarah asks, how would you deal with the dirt in a pot that only gets partially replanted every year? She's talking about she has a container plant with a perennial and adds an annual to it every year.
Okay. I would probably, and I've done that too. I have some pots that have the same thing, but I would, if it's a fairly big pot, if it has a perennial, then I would scoop out, get a good trowel and scoop out all the soil around that perennial. And what I do when I scoop out my soil, the old soil, then is I just put it in my compost. So and just recycle it so that it goes back in. But I would still definitely try to keep most of the roots of your perennial intact, and then without lifting the whole thing out, and unless you're going to reposition everything. But I would say that would still be the best thing. Go ahead and lift out the soil around that and replace it. And you may want to look for that moisture retaining soil. I hope that answers your question there.
And another question from Deanna. She asks, would you recommend the smaller stones as ground cover or mulch better, or one over the other?
Say it again. What or mulch?
Smaller stones as a form of ground cover or a mulch cover.
I am not a fan of stones because they I feel like it's easy for weeds to get growing in there, or grass to get in there, and then it's really hard to get out. So I prefer like a bark mulch, a shredded mulch, any of those over stones. I think they look nice in the beginning, but I just worry long term about what you're going to get into when the weeds start growing into there.
And Deanna follows that up with, how often would you mulch if using one of those more biodegradable sources?
I usually mulch in the spring after I planted, and that when I'm saying spring, we're talking June. I usually wait until I've finished most of my planting, then we mulch things, and then depending upon what it is, I might try to mulch again in the fall. So I lots of places do recommend mulching both spring and fall. Again, life happens. It doesn't always happen according to schedule or what you might want to do, but that could be a lofty goal for you to do that.
Or you can be like some of us and you mulch when the old mulch there's no sign of it anymore. So I need to go get some.
Right.
So Keely and Linda, I promise we have not forgotten your questions. Mary, we'll give Mary an opportunity to cover those, and then we'll circle back around to finish up any loose ends we might have on those inquiries. So Mary.
Okay. All right. When I have talked about these before with other presentations on annuals, biennials, and perennials, I decided this time that I would make a handout, and on it I have categories of the plant, and these are just my favorites, but there are 5 pages of them. So I have the plant, whether it's a perennial, an annual, a biennial / reseeding annual, whether it likes sun or shade, the size, whether or not it spreads. That's not, is it trailing, but is it one of those where it's going to reseed and spread? Some people might say, does she mean, is that invasive? Well, like I said, I'm one of those people who doesn't mind that. If you like your plants to be very much specific in one area, and you like that brown mulch all around them, you would definitely want to look at that chart, because you would not want those spreading plants, because they would probably mess up your scheme. Then I have another column. Is it good for pollinators? Another one, is it deer resistant? A lot of us have to really fight the deer, and I know that's an important characteristic when you're selecting your plants. And then I have another column, is it native? So that's what Emily was referring to. So I've tried to look up a lot of those, and if I forget about it, I do want to mention there are nurseries in this area that do specialize in native plants, and I will be glad to give you those names. The other one, I have a column, is it good for containers? And the last column, is it easy to seed in the ground? Last week, there was a great presentation on starting seeds indoors. And I'm one of those people, I really like gardening, but I choose my battles on things that I enjoy and I want to do. And for me, I have tried some of that, and with not a huge amount of success. So I purchase my plants, most of them, the annuals. But I also do fair amount of seeding of different things in the ground. So we'll cover that. So as we're going through these plants, those are the kind of features that I'm going to be talking about with each one. So, and choosing the right plants, annuals are at the top, and we'll talk about specifically each one of these categories. But the sunflower is certainly one of our favorite annuals that just, you know, brightens up the sky. And they've come out with such nice varieties. And this was one in my garden this past year. In the center, the biennials, and that one is a feverfew. And it is, to me, it is a real staple of my garden. I love it. And if you have problems with deer, feverfew is your friend, because it is, the leaves are aromatic, and the deer will not eat it. And if you plant that feverfew close to some other annuals or perennials that deer often do eat, I have found that it will be a retardant for them to eat the other plants, because of the feverfew being there. I'll go into it a little bit more detail as we go through the slides. And so biennials then would be 2 years to complete the life cycle of it. And then on the bottom, those are garden phlox, a faithful perennial. Perennials would be the ones that are going to last, their life cycle will last, you know, hopefully longer than 2 years if you give it, excuse me, the right TLC when you're putting it in. So I'm going to spend in-depth time on each one of those categories. So annuals, plants that complete their life cycle from germination to seed production within 1 year. Now, I do have on the far left, those are dahlias. Now, I think of dahlias as annuals because in our area, they are grown from bulbs. I saw them in Lowe's the other day when I was in there for something else, and they are great plants, and the blooms are just beautiful, but you need to dig those bulbs up in the fall. So that's why I refer to them as tender bulbs. You cannot leave them in the ground like tulips and our daffodils. You do need to dig them up and bring them in and store them, dry them out. So, but they are great for pollinators, and they are not deer resistant. I'm sorry, those deer, they at our other house, they really like to eat, the dahlias as well. In the center is a variety of coleus, and coleus is one of those, we used to think of coleus just as being a shade-loving plant, smaller plants. They've come out with coleus now that that will just get 2 feet tall and 2 feet wide, or sometimes 3 feet tall, and just will just thrive in full sun. On the right is one of my containers that I had on the deck this past year. And in that container, you can see the spiller, or the thriller, the filler, and the spiller. So the plant in the back is a kind of salvia, and it will be on my list. And it is one of the plants that have tubular blossoms. So those tubular blossoms are a big attracting factor for hummingbirds. So if you are looking for a plant that will attract the hummers close to your house, plant those salvias. And one of the ones that I have on my list is black and blue salvia. is particularly a big attracting plant for hummingbirds. But all of the salvias with their tubular blossoms are really great. So then if you look at the gray plant, that's a dusty miller, but there are dusty millers now that are trailing. And this one has acted as a hardy annual or as a perennial because it has come back, and it does not get upright like the other dusty millers that we traditionally see. And so it will trail out. So you can see the spikes coming out there on the gray on either side. And then one of my favorite petunias that I also have on the list, this is called Bubblegum Supertunia. And it is, that is one plant. And there's one salvia in the back. And I think there are two of those dusty millers. But the Bubblegum Supertunias are one of the most prolific bloomers of the Supertunias. They're a little more pricey. You're not going to find them in 6-packs. You're going to find them, in 4 or 6 inch pots. But they really give you your money's worth if you're looking for those, just prolific blossoms and just low maintenance. I do use a fertilizer that is particularly for petunias. I think it's Jack's petunia or fertilizer. It's not just for petunias, but particularly for the flowering plants. But Sunny Meadows on the Sharpsburg Pike recommended that, and so that's where I've gotten that. So anyway, those are 3 of my favorite annuals: the dahlias, the coleus, and then the salvias, the petunias. I guess that's more than 3, isn't it? So I have a lot of favorites. So why grow annuals?
We did have a question.
Okay,
Sorry, I
sure.
just missed it on repeating the plant names. It's from a couple minutes ago.
Okay. And it Emily is going to send out the handout.
Yes, that'll probably come tomorrow morning. Once I get the link for the recording, I'll send that out along
Yes.
with the handout. And I will pop it up on the screen when Mary's finished with her presentation too, so y'all can take a look at it. And
I made sure I went through all my slides again, and I tried to list every plant, every flower that was included in any picture. I included on the chart. So, there are 5 pages of those for you to look at. So I hope that will work. So annuals, when you buy those zinnias at the nursery, they're probably already going to be in bloom, and you're going to have that color quick, and it will probably last, a good, most of your summer. So they come in lots of colors, and they are such a nice way to add color and accent to your garden. Annual plants are generally not too expensive when you can get them in 4-packs or 6-packs. But some of the proven winners, you are paying for that reliability of that name, and generally they are a little bit pricier. And the proven winners are just, kind of the gold star of the plants, and they come out with new ones every year. Lots of different types of annuals do self-seed, and sometimes zinnias may self-seed, but I will refer more to that as we go through. So they provide bright, fast color. The cons of them, they have to be replanted every year. They usually require a little bit more watering than established perennials. And so therefore the cost can add up year after year. My friend and I, when we go plant shopping, we particularly like to go to some Pennsylvania Amish nurseries. We spend a day there, and we generally try not to even add up the amount of money that we're spending. It's kind of like that's our nourishment for our soul there. Okay, biennials. So the one on the left is tiny little favorite spring flower, forget-me-nots. And so as this biennial, as I said before, it takes 2 years to complete the life cycle. So if I plant a blue forget-me-not, that if I buy that at the store that's already blooming, or in the center, the feverfew, or on the right, the money plant or lunaria. If I buy those and they're already blooming at the nursery, foxglove is a big example of that. That plant is probably in its second year. So unless you're going to let that plant, after it blooms, the flower heads dry, and sprinkle the seeds on the ground or where you want them, that plant will not live through to the next year because its life cycle is really only 2 years. So the key to these are to get them started. And on every one of these, it's so important on biennials to let the flower heads get completely brown. On the forget-me-nots on the right, those tiny little flower heads, if they turn all the way black, they don't look nice for a while. But if you let them do that and then you scatter your seeds, you will be able to have, you will see them. They will start growing even that summer, but the foliage grows. And so the forget-me-nots that I have now were plants that I scattered the seed from last year when they were blooming. They started, and got the green leaves. The green leaves live through the winter, and then they're going to be blooming this spring. So all 3 of these, I have plants that have lived through the winter, and they will be, bigger. The feverfew, will be a larger plant on the second year. It is one that may, if there are blossoms in the spring, or really they're more June, and all of these are like the 1st of June, then it may flower for a month or so. It's a great cut flower. Like I said, the deer do not like it, and it's one of my favorites to use in arrangements. There are a couple of different varieties of that, and some of them have all white centers and others have that yellow center. The lunaria or money plant on the right has a purple blossom, and then those are the seed pods. But this seed pod is still green, so it is not ready for you to take off yet. And you need to let the seed pod turn completely tan. Some people will cut them and even use those as a dried flower inside their house in a vase or a crock. And I didn't mention on the feverfew, also when those seed heads dry, they just need to turn completely brown. They don't get as black as the forget-me-nots, but they do turn tan. And then when they're dry, then really you just strip the seed heads off and you can save them. You can bring them inside, give them away to friends, or you can just scatter them on the ground. If I would scatter that on the ground, say like in July, I will probably have small plants growing by the end of the summer, and those plants then would stay over, over the winter. So biennials, 2 years, bi meaning 2. Some pros of those, that generally they have pretty good frost tolerance. All 3 of those plants, do well. I mean, that the foliage lives over the winter, so they're have that good tolerance for cold weather. They tend to self-sow. You don't have to worry about replanting them. But if you're one of those people that likes a very particular flower bed, and I have a friend, she didn't want any of those because they mess up her garden, because they make self-sow, and she likes things more kind of like people who mix their food on the plate, or people that want everything very separate and nothing touching. So there are gardeners like that, just as there are eaters. So what are some cons of doing that, of using biennials? Usually the first year, the blossoms are smaller. Not so much on forget-me-nots, but on the feverfew, they might be. The life cycle might be a little bit unpredictable, because some take 1 year. There are even some that take 2 or 3 years. To fully blossom. They require a little bit more patience. On the right here, you see larkspur, and it is a favorite of mine in the early summer. Starts blooming probably at the end of May, June, and makes a great cut flower, is a good pollinator, when you see those tall stalks and they start to dry out, you need again to leave those seed heads, leave those flower heads on there, and that plant, the seed heads will actually rattle. And when they rattle in their pods, that's a good time. And so I just, that plant will not bloom the next year. So you basically, you're pulling the plant up after it's brown and scattering the seed. So I did that, and I have lots of those babies in the back of my flower bed, and it is they stayed green all winter long, so they'll be ready to go here when we hopefully get warmer weather. So perennials, plants that live for more than 2 years. So daylilies, we definitely know that there are many different varieties of daylilies, but they're a long-living perennial, easy maintenance, full sun, very, very hardy, and comes in many different flowers. And the house that we bought, I had the previous owner was a very avid daylily lover. So I inherited some nice daylilies that really, they weren't so big in my flower beds before, but I've really enjoyed the daylilies that she left there, and she took some too. But anyway, those varieties I have enjoyed. So, and on the plant list, I put, you can see how much that one has spread, but then there are also daylilies that might get 5 feet tall. The Gloriosa daylily, is a old-fashioned, very tall daylily. So, and it may need some staking. So, you know, that's just different varieties of that. One of my favorites, those black-eyed Susans there on the right. Both of these plants great for pollinators, and there are on the black-eyed Susans in terms of being native. There are native black-eyed Susans, but there are also, as we know, there are many cultivars. There are many varieties of these plants. Generally, on the list that I made, I did not list specific names of them. I took groupings of plants, but the black-eyed Susans are in the Rudbeckia family, and there are many different varieties. And some are basically, not all, not all Rudbeckias and black-eyed Susans are equal, and some are really listed just as an annual. So, look at the tag when you're buying, make sure that, you are getting, if you're looking for a perennial, make sure that that's what you're buying. I said before that perennials are really the backbone of your garden. If you invest in perennials and you take care of them and get them established, you get your soil prepared, you water, you mulch, it is an investment. And that was one of the things when I said that, when we were moving, I had not one clump of black-eyed Susans. I had many of them. But so even though I took so many plants with me, there were still lots and lots of virtually all of my perennials. There were still some left there as well. But I felt like it was a big investment. I had invested a lot of money into those perennials, so I wanted to take them with me to the new house, and I was successful in accomplishing that. So they do require less maintenance. They flower year after year. They can attract those good insects, help build up your soil. They make great landscaping plants, and generally they're predictable. You know what's going to, where they're going to come up and what they're going to look like. But then one of the cons of them is that they're not as flexible. If you want to change the color scheme of your flower bed, or if you want to change the look of your bed, then you're going to have to dig those up and transplant them someplace else. Sometimes they are more susceptible to disease. So that could be an issue. They do tend to take up more space per plant than annuals and biennials. And they are more expensive. Yeah, definitely more expensive. So now we come to my favorites, my favorite flowers. And I chose to do pollinators. I think all of us need to be really conscious and cognizant of how we're treating our earth, and being, if we can make a difference in the life cycle of the monarch butterfly, which is there on the cosmos on the left, by the plants that we plant in our garden, then I feel that's important for us. Maybe we can just make a little difference, but if we all strive to do that, then I think our insect population is going to be a healthier one. So what I've done is, when I've listed these, I've put the annuals on the left and the perennials on the right. And so I've got a couple of slides of those. And each one of these plants that I'm mentioning now, as I said before, I have specifically listed them in the handout that I've prepared. If you'll see over on the left, in front of Cosmos, I have put two little asterisks there, and easy to start from seeds or bulbs. So those are the ones that particularly I might start by planting those seeds or bulbs in the ground. Cosmos at the top is probably maybe 3 to 5 feet tall. Is just a great, very light and airy plant, not heavy foliage, but is definitely a friend to pollinators, and comes in, pinks and whites and magentas, and so it also makes a nice cut flower. The hummingbird there is going to the canna blossoms, and cannas are one of those that we have to start from the tubers or bulbs. Now, you can start those if you want to in a pot to maybe get a head start on things before you plant them in the ground. I've done that before. And people even use cannas if you have a large container. I've seen some of those wooden barrel containers planted with cannas. I think, even at the beach, they do that. And cannas are real low maintenance after they get going. Japanese beetles do like to, chew on those leaves and blossoms, but other than that, they're pretty low maintenance. Get them started, and they don't require a whole lot of water or care. And then the zinnia down below there, another easy one to start from seeds. And of all of those, there are zinnias that are short, that are 12 inches. There are zinnias that are taller, that maybe get 3 to 4 feet. So look at your tag, look at your space, think about where you want them. And, lots of zinnias are used in containers if they're the small variety, but zinnias also make a great cut flower if you grow the tall ones. Now let's look at the 3 perennials there on the right.
Mary, just
Yes.
to butt in real quick, we have about
Sure.
10 minutes left.
Oh, goodness. Goodness, how did that happen?
Time flies when you're talking about something you love.
Thank you. All right. So you'll definitely have to refer a lot to my to the chart that I made. So catmint or nepeta, and it is not catnip. Catmint is the one at the top right. Anishyssop or agastache there with the bumblebee on it in the middle. Both, particularly the anishyssop has that fragrance, and the garden phlox we've already talked more about. And there are short and tall varieties of those as well. Lantanas at the top left, boy, they are just, get those started. They are wonderful, sun-loving plants, come in a lot of different varieties. Some are going to get tall, some are more spreading. So again, look at your plant label. The celosia is right beside it there, the pinkish plant with the bee on it. And so it is another faithful one. And those are feather or plume celosia. They're ones that looks like a rooster comb, a coxcomb, many different varieties of that as well. And some even do well in containers where others are get 3 feet tall. Sunflowers, we've already talked about. Black-eyed Susans over on the perennials, we've talked about those. Purple coneflower is just a faithful friend. just real backbone of my beds, and I definitely enjoy those. And if you let the seed heads go dry on those and then scatter those, it's very easy to have more of those in your bed. The one at the bottom right is Heliopsis. And so it is in the sunflower family, but it is another very, very easy one. And on a lot of these, the perennials that I like, the more you cut, the more they're going to grow. And I really like to have cut flowers inside. So that's an important factor for me. There are the bubblegum supertunias that I've talked about. Black and blue salvia. So I have a big pot of that I and have put something, petunias or something else in with it as well, but right outside of our sliding glass doors. And so, I can sit at the breakfast table and just love watching those hummingbirds come in like that. And they just, it is very, very good for attracting those. And I find that really the blue one is the best. There are lots of varieties of that salvia, but and pink and other colors, but the one they seem to be more prone to is the blues. And this black and blue is just a little bit deeper. There are several varieties that are also lighter. Marigolds, just so easy, and they've come out with a lot of new varieties. Though I got one last summer that I did that I used was really almost a rose colored. So it was pretty. And then on the perennials, lavender, we would like to think of that, and on the handout I've got, not all lavenders are equal either. English lavenders are the ones that are most hardy for our area. And those French lavenders that you see growing at Costco that look beautiful, those tall ones in those pots, they are just not as hardy for our area. So they are not as good. And goldenrod and milkweed, you don't really think of those as plants that you want maybe in your flower bed. But if you are looking for plants for pollinators, goldenrod is one of the late summer plants that is just a mainstay for pollinators, as well as those fall asters. And at the bottom, you see the milkweed. This is common milkweed, but on the handout, I've also listed there's swamp milkweed, which is not nearly as invasive as the common milkweed. And so if you're worried about that aspect, you might want to choose the swamp milkweed. But there you see the caterpillar of the monarch butterfly. And so milkweed is the host plant for monarchs. So if you are planting milkweed, it is the swamp milkweed or the butterfly weed, you are being a friend to those pollinators. So favorite shade loving plants, almost everything else we've talked about is sun. So here you have wax begonias, and then right beside the wax in the pot, that's a Riger begonia or a tuberous begonias. And I've got both of those listed on the chart as well. Impatiens, the colorful white and red green leaves at the bottom, those are caladiums. And that is a tender tuber that you can buy, generally already potted, but you could save them over. This is a blue lobelia that is a trailing. Here is an annual. But if we skip all the way over on the right, there is a tall lobelia that is the great lobelia that is also a shade-loving perennial. If you look up at the top, those are the autumn ferns. Autumn ferns or Japanese ferns are both great shade-loving plants. Lady fern is another one that is a native plant in West Virginia that is a favorite that I have in some of my beds as well. bleeding heart. Then Helleborus or Lenten rose is right under the bleeding heart there in the middle is the Helleborus. And there are so many new varieties of that. And it's called the Lenten rose because it is starting to bloom now. In fact, I had one even blooming in January, just starting. So they're great. The foliage is evergreen, and they're a great plant to have in your beds. And of course, there's so many varieties of hostas now. So, you know, from ones that are 6 inches across, some baby ones, to ones that are, you know, close to 5 feet across with huge, huge leaves. So again, some are a little more sun loving, but most hostas are more shade seeking. Favorite biennials, we've talked about feverfew, we've talked about larkspur. A new one right there is the rose campion, that is the rose colored one with the gray leaves. And so it's a beautiful magenta colored blossom that is a favorite. Love in a Mist is this one with the pods. So there you see the white like blossom, and the blossoms can be pastel colors, pinks, blues, white, and then those are the pods. So you see the pods as that magenta stripe, and they dry very well for dried arrangements inside. And Cleome is a reseeding annual that just has, you know, it blooms all the way up until frost in the fall. So it's a faithful friend for me. All right, benefits of gardening. Beauty and value to your home, improves your mental health, cognitive health, heart health, reduces stress, burns calories, and is good for your soul. To nurture a garden is to feed not just on your body, but the soul. And here are a few pictures of my beds. The one on the left is at the old house, and you can see the phlox, the black-eyed Susans, and you see that I like things close together. Don't give me too much mulch. And on the right, this is the new bed, and that was in the fall. And in fact, that was the bed that I did lasagna gardening in. And the soil is just wonderful in that. And at the bottom, you know, again, for our monarchs. So, okay, can I take a breath? Oh gosh, we're at 8:29, sorry.
You are just right on time. While I pull up these questions, I am
Yes.
also going to go ahead and share your publication you created, which is just a wonderful resource. I think everybody is going to really love this. So as you can see, she put together the name of the plant. They're in alphabetical order. If it's a perennial, an annual, biennial, sun-loving, shade-loving, the size, how much it spreads, and then some other things that you may or may not want, as in if it's native, deer-resistant, good for pollinators, good for containers. So pretty much your one-stop shop to getting started with flowers. All right, I'm going to head over to the chat. We had a couple questions. Keely, I hope that helps answer some of your questions for the native species. We definitely did not have all the time in the world to talk about all the details with flowers, as wonderful as that would be.
Yes.
Yes, this document, I usually don't get the link for the recording until the morning, so it will go out in the morning to all participants. So a couple questions we didn't get to. A couple are related to roses, Mary. Linda and Stefan both ask about rose variety and care.
You did. You know, I'm a big fan. If you like easy care roses, and I am not a sprayer. So the roses that I have are knockout roses, which are great landscaping roses. And the other company that I really enjoy buying reputable roses from is the David Austin company. You can search that. They send a great catalog. They, you know, they have so many varieties. And so because I'm not a sprayer and I want a hardy rose with low maintenance and blooming, then, you know, I can order just that kind of rose. And that is good for our area. So I would highly recommend David Austin roses out of Texas. They're a lot of English roses, but so they have climbers and shrub roses and tea roses and just lots of different choices to choose from.
Well, Sarah also asks, what do you suggest for annuals that get leggy throughout the season? That's a really good question.
Well, and I would say, you know, cutting them back, giving them a haircut, trimming. Sometimes those petunias, you know, they definitely get long and leggy. And by say August, you know, I'm really trimming those back. So don't, you know, on lots of your annuals, that's the way to get them to bush up a little bit more, is to give them a haircut.
And one other question about, would you mention trying to use native plants to encourage bees and birds?
Oh, yes, yes. Because remember, your native plants are the ones that are acclimated to this area. So if it is native to West Virginia, then you can feel sure that that is a plant that is going to be attracting birds to your area. And I did mention at the beginning, I wanted to mention Sunny Meadows Nursery on the Sharpsburg Pike. The Potomac Valley Audubon Society hooks up with them a couple of times a year to do a native plant sale. So that's a good place to get plants that you know are natives. And so if you follow them on Facebook, or if you can look at their website, the owners over there send out a great email every week that I really enjoy. So that's you know, I would highly recommend them as well. The other place is a nursery landscaper that is in Carneysville that is called Native Havens. We just looked him up before we started the presentation. His name is James Dillon, and he is a wonderful, wonderful, knowledgeable landscaper. So if you're looking for anything like that, I would highly recommend him. It is pricey, but you know, he has a good reputation of being, you know, really trying to guide you in using natives and your landscaping. And so I would recommend him as well, Native Havens and Sunny Meadows. And, you know, I also go to Colonial and Martinsburg, and I go to Shepherdstown Nursery, Winchester and Weber's, one's in Pennsylvania. So I, you know, I'm a real flower lover, so I shop all around.
And Melanie also mentions that our WVU Extension Master Gardener Association, in their annual May plant sale, also has natives.
Oh, okay.
We're still working
Good.
out what that might look like this year, but we do hope to have a plant sale of some kind.
Okay.
And Joanne puts in the Q&A that she does recommend Lasagna Gardening by Patricia. And I think some of you that have stuck with us for the beginning session all the way to now, you'll notice Mary's topics talked a lot about some of the items that Michael covered in setting up a garden. So you'll find that some of these themes and considerations for gardening are the same, whether you're planting vegetables or whether you're planting flowers. So thank you, Mary, for giving us just a truly fantastic overview on flowers. And I know everybody really appreciates when you give
Good. I enjoy
wonderful
sharing. Yeah.
recommendations.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good luck with your gardening. And guess what? Spring is not far away.
Warmer temps are ahead. Thank you, everybody, for
Yes.
hanging in with us for a few extra minutes for
Yeah,
some wonderful
thank you.
information. If
Okay.
there's no
Good
other
night.
questions, we'll have a great night.
Mm.